All right, everybody, this is John. Welcome to tonight's free video. We're going to talk about the market action, Nvidia earnings, and kind of upcoming price action and setups. So the earnings are out, and it looks like they're kind of, let's see, revenue range. So 68 billion, estimate was 66 billion. So overall, we got a beat. And of course, the main thing is what's the expected range going forward. Now, the expected move that was priced into this, into the options market, was $11.42. Right now, after hours, up about $5. Now, obviously, that could change a lot by the time morning comes. So it looks like at this point, the options were priced correctly. So, if you bought a $20 out of the money call, it's not going to work unless obviously this drastically moves higher because of the IV crush. But selling at the money put credit spreads works just fine. And then if we come over here and we just kind of look at this daily chart on Nvidia, you can see that spike high up here around 210. And then since then, we've been consolidating. And again, not the most interesting chart on the planet. Does it something where we kind of come up and then come right back down into the swamp of moving averages and, look at it from there. Well, one of the things I like to look at, you'll note that on some of the squeezes here, there are arrows. And I made a note today that, on the, on this, so this is something that's been 7 years in the making, and a lot of this is answering questions from clients, and also just kind of like trying to show my kids like, hey, trading, and of course bringing the squeeze into town, into it. Now, on the 5-minute chart, I'll watch a 5-minute chart if I'm like day trading and stuff, but I've always kind of said, hey, don't really bother with squeezes that are under lower than 30 minutes. There's just not a lot of useful information there. But what I found is with this updated ultra squeeze, so what will happen is that when the ideal conditions for a squeeze conspire to come together, you'll get these white arrows. And I found it even on a 5-minute chart, they're super useful because when you see continual ideal conditions for a 5-minute squeeze, you just kind of drift up without any, it's like on something like this, it's always like, oh, is the shoe going to drop or we're going to sell off? And when you see this, it's just kind of very, very comforting that way. And here's an example when it's not like that. So, and this is just like 2 days before, so we can see when there's squeezes and you don't see the arrows, essentially the idea is, really don't expect a lot of upward movement. And so, yeah, this one had some upward movement, but it was a dead cat bounce from a downtrend. And so that's something that I found that's really useful in terms of like, all right, are we on the right side of this? All right, so one that's been setting up here is Micron Technologies. You can see that, so I got the Squeeze Pro up here, and then the ideal squeeze down there and down here. And the ideal squeeze is just like, hey, these are ideal conditions for a squeeze, accumulate your position, and then, you're off and running. Ideal conditions for a squeeze, accumulate your position, and you're off and running. And then another one that we've been looking at here is LRCX. And this is one that I love here. And so the question, that'll come up on something like this is just like, okay, well, is it too late to get in? And what do I do? And so there's a few things here that will help with this. And you can just say like, okay, let's, I'm a huge fan of pullback to the moving averages. So here's the key ones. And so if you see this and it's like, hey, it's green. If you see the ideal arrows and this is green, you buy all pullbacks into this zone. Okay, and so there's been pullbacks to 220, 225, 227, 228, and here we are, we hit a high of 256 today. So, once the arrows are gone, there's some, a lot of times there still can be some upside, but the ideal entry is in this green zone while there's an arrow, okay? And that can save kind of a lot of, frustration and things like that too. So like, this is the Squeeze Pro, and so you can see on the Squeeze Pro here, it's like, okay, well here is a squeeze and there's a blue histogram, so should we be buying this? And the answer is, well, it's not an ideal setup, so you want to pass, okay? And if you come here and it's like, oh, here's one, oh, there's some arrows, great. It wasn't a huge move, but it was a very tradable move. A little bit of a pop there. And then, of course, this one here was obviously pretty good. But what's great about it is that you can see that there's a lot of stuff that you don't mess with. Essentially, hey, this isn't really an ideal squeeze, so don't mess with it. It's, it's either Chop City or, it's not going to work. So the other question that comes up then is just like, all right, well, how do you find these? And so one of the things I've always been a fan of is TradeStation Radar Screen, and they've got a really unique tool, and I've used it for 20 years, and no other platform has really been able to adapt it for whatever reasons. And so now we've got an online version of this, which is great. And I've got like 800 stocks in here. It's curated. We update it, especially with some of the up and coming stocks and things like that. And so you can just scroll down and say, okay, is there an ideal squeeze? Is there an ideal squeeze? Squeeze is over. There's no ideal squeeze. Are the ideal squeeze? Okay, the VIX has an ideal squeeze. That's kind of bearish. Here's an ideal squeeze in biotech. Okay. Now the other thing you can do on this is just say, okay, instead of scrolling, say I just want to find ideal squeezes. Okay, great. And now anything with an ideal squeeze is here, and then we can just kind of look at it. So let's look at ASML. So we'll come over here. We can type in ASML. And what do we got? Okay, great. If we come over here, we can see that there's an ideal squeeze setting up. There's been plenty of times to get in at these key levels, and essentially at this point, it's kind of gone. So you want to kind of check this every day and make sure that if you see this stuff, you're putting this stuff in the buy zone. So anyway, it's really cool. This is something I'm handing off to my kids to use. It just simplifies this whole process. Which squeezes do you get? You get the ones that only have arrows, and then where do you buy it? You buy it in the green zone, and if it's purple, obviously don't buy it, and all the things there. So pretty cool stuff. So if you're interested in this, I am doing a webinar Wednesday night at 6 o'clock about this. And if you're getting this and it's past that time, you can get the recording. So I'm going to scan for these ideal setups live with the Squeeze Ultra. And the Squeeze Ultra essentially answers the question, hey, of all these squeezes that are here, which one is the best one? And I went back on all my big trades and said, okay, what were the conditions that these trades set up did really, really well? And why did I intuitively skip these other ones? And we're able to quantify that. So that's the first time we've been able to do that. Also, this the Squeeze Ultra, the reason the 5-minute looks so good, works so well, is that the settings adapt to the time frame. So before, the squeeze was always the same parameters no matter what time frame, but what we found out in backtesting is that the parameters that work best, like on a 30-minute chart or a 5-minute chart, are vastly different than on a daily chart. So now when you automatically switch time frames, it automatically adjusts to the best parameters for that time frame, which is awesome. And then, of course, just some basic rules to kind of get in, make it clear and simple, and in terms of the scanner to find it and everything like that too. And what's been great about this is the first time I've rolled something out to my kids where they're just like, it's kind of like you could hear the sigh of relief. Oh my God, this is easy. I'm not confusing them with a bunch of jargon. Okay, so if you're interested in this, put in your email here. Again, if you're getting this in time, you can watch it live starting at 6 o'clock on Wednesday the 25th. If not, there'll be a replay. It's really worth your time if you just kind of are looking for something, especially it's always about making it easier and being patient. And what I found sometimes in trading is if you go back and you look at your statements, it's like, man, if I just didn't do those 12 trades, I would have had a great quarter or a great month. And this whole thing is designed to keep you out of trades that are mediocre and be patient and wait for the best ones, which is pretty awesome. All right, hope it helps. Have a good one. See you at the next update. Hey, John here with Simpler Trading. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, comment down below and let us know what topic you want to see us cover next. Also, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you can get notified when we release new videos. And if you want to watch us trade in real time using our own money, go to simplertrading.com and learn how to sign up. Good trading, and we'll see you next time.